Who told you to grow your own tomatoes from scratch? Who de-influenced you from living in the countryside? Now, if there's one thing that I know about my generation, millennials, is that we rarely do things by halves. And this was something that I thought would happen with the whole slow living movement. We've seen an influx of people leaving the city and trading their lives for something a bit more rural. And then, like myself, being like, hang on a second, this is a lot. And it's not quite the labour involved, but it's much rather the fact that we sit on the cusp of the late stages of a more analogue way of life to what we have now. We're used to that instant gratification lifestyle, and so we almost have this reactionary response to go completely the other way and go off grid. The things after living a more rural life for coming up to 2 years, I would argue that I had a more slower living approach when I lived in the city. But I first started off gardening with a few containers in a shared garden that got barely any light. But I was committed to that intentionality. I think what happens when we dream about living outside somewhere more rural is that we end up putting ourselves at the author of every single step. There are some days where I just want to have pasta and a quick tomato sauce, and I'm suddenly looking at myself and thinking, who told you to grow your own tomatoes from scratch? I feel like you can still have that intentionality by being maybe more conscious of where you shop, the produce you buy, and maybe even just doing things like, if you're going to buy a pasta sauce, looking at an independent brand or someone who makes those locally. But when you bombard yourself with the responsibility of growing absolutely everything, you kind of end up coming full circle, because now there's a sense of urgency. You've got to worry about the ducks, and yes, now the heat wave, the hosepipe ban, and how you're going to manage it all on top of having a 9-to-5 job. I don't just say this because housing prices are going up. I say it because I want people to feel like the countryside life is still accessible to them. I've done the city life, and now I'm out in the middle of nowhere with ducks, a cat, and growing a lot of my own food. But the reality and truth of it is that you can still have elements of that lifestyle right where you are. I say that because I lived it. Oh, that's quite nice. I've gone for my own blueberry and vanilla matcha latte. Look at me.